So I have a question for you all, and if you have an answer, I want you to shout it out, okay? And here's the question. If you're not too embarrassed to answer, who is your favorite band or your favorite musical artist when you were in high school? So think back. Some of y'all, that was a long time ago, if y'all can remember it. But who was your favorite band or artist when you were in high school? Is anybody willing? Hold on. I can't fit that line. Dan, what did you say? The Beatles. Did I hear an Eagles or no? The Eagles also. Did I hear James Brown? Yes, I love it. New Kids on the Block. Yes. Queen. Yeah, that's great. Huh? What'd you say? Lionel Richie and Dinah Ross. Yes. Green Day. Solid choice. Felice, what do you got? Dave Matthews Band. Okay. I was anti-Dave Matthews Band when I was in high school. For no good reason. No good reason. But thank you, Felice. Yes, Sonda. Earth, Wind, and Fire. That's, yeah. Joni Mitchell, yeah. The Monkees. I remember the Monkees. Yeah, that's good. I had a friend who liked the Monkees. Yeah, Isaac. Who was that? All right. Sounds great. Jack. The Supertones. Yeah, the Christian ska band right there. That's good. Yes. Elvis. Yeah, okay. Elvis. He's the legend. That's right. Any others that have not been mentioned, or Michael Jackson, Police, Chicago, so much good music. What, Shelly, you got one? Reliant K. All right, I love it. Dustin was pointing at you for some reason, so I felt like I should call on you. Yes, Donna. Moody Blues. All right. These are great. Y'all got some pretty decent musical taste. I love it. Boys to Men. Yeah, no, that's good. I love Boys to Men. Was it Cooley High Harmony, I think, was an album there. I love that one. Motown Philly Back Again. That's right. That's right. I could sing some Boys to Men, but I'm not going to. So when I was in high school, I got involved in my youth group. Youth group became kind of my place when I was in high school. I moved to Lexington at 8th grade, and I got involved at a church because my dad was working there called Centenary. That's where I met Laura, my wife, so great place. Give a hand for that, yes. But Centenary, I grew up there at that youth group, and I very quickly made some new friends there. And there were three guys in particular at that youth group that greatly influenced my musical interest. This guy, one of my good friends, he's still one of my good friends today, Josh Coron, another guy named Brian Jackson, and this other guy named David LeBoon. Because they were all three into this hippie jam band called Fish. Have y'all ever heard of Fish? This is a picture. This is more of a current photo of them. Yes, the drummer, he wears a dress at every show. That's his thing. But it's spelled P-H-I-S-H, so not with an F like you would normally spell fish. But my friends, they were like crazy into this band. They wore their T-shirts. I eventually did as well. Had all their albums. They had stickers they put on their cars. I had one as well. But these guys were true fans, and they would... Fan was also spelt with a PH, because if you're a Fish fan, you got to use the PH, right? And my friends even, like, they were so into it that they had, like, recorded cassette tapes of live shows, because at Fish shows, they would let tapers come. And so they would come, and they would set up kind of in a particular spot that was good for sound. They would have their microphones and everything, and they allowed them to record the shows live. And then they would go and they'd put them on cassette tapes, and you could get on these like forums online and you could trade them. And so you would put them in the mail, send them to somebody, then they would copy it, they would send it to somebody else, and you would trade these shows back and forth. And so my friends had like dozens upon dozens of Fish shows. And because every show was different, all right? And so it made sense to have them because, you know, one show, it might look one way, but the next one is completely different. They did a whole like stint at Madison Square Garden a few years ago called the Baker's Dozen. They did 13 shows in a row at Madison Square Garden, and they did not repeat a song the entire time. So they played all new songs every single night. Imagine how many songs that would be. So they were really great live, and it was a really big part of the band. So Fish, let me tell you a little bit about them. I'm just going to indulge me here because this is like, I know a lot about this, all right? So I just got to impart this knowledge to somebody. But they formed their band in Vermont, in Burlington, while they were in college in 1983, the year I was born. And shockingly, they are still together today, playing after 41 years of being a band. At the turn, one of their most significant shows they ever played was at the turn of the millennium, so like going from 99 to 2000. They played a show at an Indian reservation in South Florida called Big Cypress, and they played it basically in a swamp there in South Florida. They turned this whole swamp land into like a little city for the week. And so they did a music festival there, and they were the only band. This is not like Bonnaroo or something today. Bonnaroo probably wouldn't have existed without Fish, just to be honest. But they didn't have a lot of bands. It was just one band, and 80,000 fans showed up for this concert in South Florida. And they played, and one of the most significant parts of it is at the turn of the year, when it got to midnight, they started right before midnight, and they played all the way until sunrise. So they played for like well over 6 hours straight without taking a break, which is kind of wild. And this is something that's really common with Fish. They're known for their very long jams at their live shows. And I was a little taken off guard by this when I went to my first show. But, on an album, the song might be like 5 minutes. But when you go to the show, it literally could be a 40-minute version of the song, all right? And so some people just can't tolerate that. And they're like, I need, just give me a song that's, 3 or 4 minutes, move on to the next one. Some people don't get it at all. I didn't really get it at first, but I learned to appreciate those long jams. But you could be at a song and they could just go on forever. And so they have their song, but they just kind of let the music take them wherever they want to go, where the music takes them. It was all it's interesting because most of the show, they may know the set list, they know the songs they're going to play, but most of the concert is all improvisation. It's all improv. It's like, we'll play this song, but then we'll just see kind of where we want to go with this. And they'll just jam together for hours and hours at these concerts. It's a very interesting thing. They don't have a plan necessarily for where that music is going to take them. They want to have a profound musical experience, connect with their audience, have a good time together, and that's the ultimate goal. Most bands don't do a lot of improvisation. It's not something that most people are very comfortable with. They kind of know how their song's going to go. Like, for instance, when I lead worship here, it's like I got it planned out. We're going to do verse 1, chorus, verse 2. We'll do a guitar solo. Then we'll do this. Then we'll do a cappella at the end. Song's over. I have a formula for how that goes. Doing improv is kind of scary because you get out there and you don't necessarily have an idea on where this is going to take you. And that's a little bit scary to do. Most people don't do that because it's so scary. It's a lot easier to have it all planned out. You think about an orchestra, they have their sheet music. They know exactly every single note they're going to play. They have a conductor that's actually telling them what to play. It's a lot safer than like jazz, for instance, where it's like you just kind of get together and you're listening to one another and you see where the music is going to take you. Both are great. But one of them's a little more risky, in my opinion. It's a little more terrifying. And that's why a lot of people don't do improv, including myself. It's not something I necessarily want to do. I was listening to an interview recently with Trey Anastasio, who's the lead kind of guitarist and main songwriter for the band. And the interviewer asked him about improv. He said, how do you get on stage and stand in front of 10,000 people, tens of thousands of people, and just let go, and let the music take you? And what Trey said, and it's interesting, he said the most important part of all of it is trust. He said the most important part is trust. He talked about how the other 3 members in the band, they're his best friends, and he trusts them 100%. He talked about in the early years how they used to spend so much time together just on a van, driving all over the country. And they got to know each other so well that they became like brothers to one another. And he said basically the support of their friendship is more important than anything. It's even more important than the music. And over time, he said they've learned to trust each other. And he made this comment. He said, I don't have to worry on stage because they've got me. He said, if I take a risk, then he knows the other band members are going to have his back. And he knows that they put in the work. He knows that they know what they're doing. And he knows that they're all committed to this thing. You know, we've talked a lot about, now early on, I remember at the very beginning of our Acts series, I told you all that I believed Acts was a risky book. And other people have said this as well. It's very risky to ask God, like, where the Spirit is going to lead you. And follow the Spirit where the Spirit is going to lead you. The Spirit was leading the first Christians to take great risk, to step out into very uncertain situations. There was no rule book for them to follow at this point. Like they had the first Christians were Jews, and they had their Jewish faith, which helped them, right? Because there was a lot of wonderful tradition there. But the Spirit was leading them in some new directions, and they had no rule book on how to do this whole thing. There was no instruction manual on how to do this. The New Testament didn't exist at that point. They were kind of writing the New Testament as they went through it, right? Their stories are the things that came to be in our New Testament. They were following the Spirit's lead, branching out to new people, going to new places, going in new directions, practicing ministry in new ways. And I believe one of the reasons they were able to take those risks is because they had each other. You know, we talked about how in Acts no one really does anything alone. Even Paul, the courageous and bold warrior for Jesus, you know, he didn't do much on his own. He had people like Barnabas. He had Silas. He had Priscilla and Aquila. He had Lydia. He had all these people in his life that supported him. I can imagine Paul saying something similar. I don't have to worry. Like when I walk into this new town, I don't have to worry because they've got me. If I take a risk, I know that the others are going to have my back. I know they're also committed to this thing as well. You know, I wanted to talk about improv a little bit in music because I see a deep connection to our faith, particularly a faith that is yielding and surrendering to the Spirit. I see life of faith. The life of faith is as much like improv. You know, over the past few years, we've learned that the Bible is not really a rule book. The Bible is not an instruction manual for life. The Bible is this ancient book of wisdom. It's a collection of stories and poetry and history. It's meant to inspire us and help us draw us closer into God's heart and God's desire for the world. And we have a tendency to want a rule book, right? We want to know exactly what we can and cannot do. We want everything spelled out for us because it's a whole lot easier that way. We want to know what the plan is. But that's not what we find in the book of Acts. We find a group of people surrendering and yielding to the Spirit and following the Spirit in new directions. The early Christians were figuring it out as they went. You know, Jesus had come and they never expected what Jesus did. They didn't expect the gift of the Spirit on Pentecost. All this was new to them. Jesus turned the world upside down and called them to reach out to new people and to envision and live a life, this new life where Jew and Gentile could be together as one. There was no rule book on how to do this. They had to follow the Spirit's leading and respond to the needs and issues as they arose. It was improvisation. They were writing their story on the fly, following the wild and free Spirit into new and deeper spaces of love. They had no idea what each day would bring. I mean, it's exciting to think about and it's terrifying to think about. They had no idea. They had to trust God to lead them, and they had to trust each other. You know, when I started here at this church way back in 2006, and I started here as a youth pastor. I was 22 years old, or 22 or 23, I think, and I didn't really know anything. I didn't know what I was doing. I was way in over my head. It was a very overwhelming experience. I started, and there weren't a whole lot of kids, and they're like, hey, we don't know how to do youth ministry. You figure this out. I'm like, well, I don't know how to do youth ministry either, but you hired me, so we'll see what we can do. And so my wife and I jumped in, and we really tried to do this with this wonderful team of people. I remember early on, I got a call from this guy, and he worked with youth in the community, particularly at-risk youth who were just experiencing a lot of challenges in their lives. His name was Aaron Mosley, and he called me up one time, and I'd met him, and then he called me shortly after that, and he had a strange request. He told me he had 2 teenagers who were being court-ordered to get involved in a community organization. And so they'd gotten into some trouble. They had to go to court about it, and the judge was like, hey, I don't want y'all to have to, you know, be incarcerated or anything like that. I want y'all to like make some positive steps, and so you need to get involved in some kind of positive community organization. And Aaron asked me, he's like, well, and I'm like, okay, well, tell me more, what's going on? He's like, well, I wondered if the organization could be your youth group that they get involved in. And so, you know, as a young 20-something, I was a little bit nervous about welcoming two teenagers I didn't know into our new youth group, but particularly two teenagers who were being forced to come to my youth group, not by their parents, but by the court system, by a judge. I already felt in over my head, but I said yes because that seemed like the thing Jesus would want me to do, right? And I wasn't quite sure where that would lead. You know, there isn't any youth ministry resource that tells you how to do this kind of thing, to be honest. But here's the thing, like, I had this team of leaders. We had this team of leaders, including my wife, who was my partner in all this work, and we trusted each other. And we had built this wonderful team of people. I trusted them, and they trusted me, and I knew that if I took this risk, then they would have my back, and they would follow the Spirit with me. And that was just the beginning of a long journey together over 5 years of just really opening our doors and saying, hey, Jesus challenged us to let the children come to us, right? And so opening our doors and saying, hey, no matter who you are, no matter where you've come from, no matter what you've experienced, you have a place here in our youth group. And it was a beautiful thing because we figured it out together. And together we created something beautiful, I believe, in our youth group that was made up of kids literally from all over the place, from all different life experiences, and something wonderful was happening. But there was no plan in place. We didn't know how we were going to do this. It truly was improv. It was responding to the Spirit's leading in community with other people, with the Scriptures helping to lead us and guide us. And something wonderful happened in those years. You know, in Acts chapter 20, we were in 19 last week. We're in 20 this week. A big shift happens in Acts chapter 20. And it mirrors a shift in the gospel, actually. So what happens in Acts chapter 20 is just like Jesus, Paul sets his face towards Jerusalem. All right? I don't know if y'all remember, but there's a point in the Gospels where Jesus sets his face towards Jerusalem and he says, I have to go to Jerusalem. He says, bad things are waiting for me there. There's some people there who aren't happy with me. And Jesus knew suffering was coming for him if he went to Jerusalem. And Paul also sets his face towards Jerusalem. Luke is setting it up, showing us that Paul was truly becoming like Jesus in the fullest extent of that, because he was truly taking on what Jesus took on. And Paul knew that when he got to Jerusalem, there were going to be some bad things waiting for him, because he knew there were people there who were not happy with what he was doing. And so before he went to Jerusalem, just like Jesus, Paul gathered his friends and fellow leaders together and gave them some parting words. It's kind of like the Last Supper when Jesus gathered his disciples. Paul is modeling what he's doing after Jesus, gathering his leaders and friends to give them some parting words of wisdom. And I want to share just one verse of what he shared here. He says to them, and these are all the leaders from Ephesus, because this was an important town to him. He had just been through a lot. They came and met him in this other town, and he gives them these words. He says, keep watch over yourselves and all the flock of which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers. Be shepherds of the church of God, which he has bought with his own blood. So he says to keep watch over yourself and also keep watch over all the flock. Essentially, he's telling them, I need y'all to take care of yourselves, pay close attention to yourself, have some self-awareness, pay attention to what's going on in you, and you also need to take care of each other. Keep watch, pay attention to each other, listen to each other, commit to each other. In a way, I see him saying all the ministry, all the good deeds, all the success, it doesn't really matter if you aren't taking care of yourself and you aren't taking care of one another. You know, I remember a few years ago serving on a board for an organization with a lot of very passionate people. And we were doing some risky and important work together. Really, really important work. But ultimately, it didn't work out like I hoped it would. Because ultimately what we found out is we didn't trust each other. We weren't keeping watch over ourselves very well, and definitely not keeping watch over one another very well. Our work involved creatively yielding to the Spirit, to the mission of the organization, allowing each one to add in their own creative touch, adding each one to add their own passion to the work. It was truly improv. It was writing the story as we lived it, building something important together. But it didn't work out the way I'd hoped because we didn't have that trust with one another that we needed. You know, Paul knew that the leaders in Ephesus had really important, creative, adaptive work that they needed to be doing. He knew that the Spirit would lead them to deeper places of love. The Spirit was going to lead them to new places and to reach out and welcome new people. He knew that the story of Jesus was still being written. It wasn't over yet. And in order for it to work, he knew they needed to trust each other. They would need each other. And so he told them, look out for yourself and also look out for each other. Make sure you're paying attention. You're looking at yourself and you're looking at one another, and that you're keeping watch. You're taking care of one another. You know, I've asked you all many times, do y'all believe that the Spirit in Acts is the same Spirit that is moving and working in the world today? And usually everybody says, yes, we believe that. We believe that the same Spirit in Acts is still working today. Well, if that's the case, then the ministry of Jesus is still moving forward into the future. The story of Jesus is still being written through the Holy Spirit working in us and through us. And we've got to discern today how the Spirit is leading us to creatively respond to the needs that are around us, to creatively address the pressing issues of our day. We've got to discern how the Spirit is leading us to creatively continue the ministry of Jesus. And reimagine what Jesus means for us right now in 2024 in North Lexington. And there's no instruction manual on how to do this. It's all, in many ways, it's improv. It's yielding to the Spirit together, trusting each other enough to take risk, and then having each other's back as we stumble through this life together. You know, I want to share back to my favorite band from high school, Fish. He was sharing this practice technique that they do together. And I thought it was beautiful. And it's a representation, I think, of what the church ought to look like. So he said at their concerts, they improv a lot. They're moving in all these unknown territory when they're playing together. But they actually prepare for this. They practice for this. And one thing they do when they rehearse is they all get together with their instruments. So they have a guitarist, a bassist, a keys player, and a drummer. And they all get in a circle together. And so what they do is one person will take the lead. And so maybe we can imagine the bassist takes the lead this time. So the bass player would play some kind of bass lick on the bass, and they would start to listen to what the bass player is doing. And then the next person in line would listen deeply to what the bassist is doing. And then they add something to complement what the bassist is doing. So imagine the guitarist goes next, and he starts adding a lick or some piece that really complements what the bass player is doing. And then the keyboard player is listening to them, and he's like, I'm going to add this to the mix. And then the drummer's listening deeply to what's happening. He says, I'm going to add my own touch. And once they realize that everybody is in sync and everybody is playing together, someone will yell, hey, we're in sync. And then the next person takes the lead, and they take it into a new direction. And then the next person listens, and they do this for hours and hours, learning to listen to one another, to add their own creative touch, and then get in sync with each other, and then allow someone else to take the lead. They will do this for hours, listening, adding their own creative touch, and then getting in sync. And through this process, they learn to listen to each other, to support each other, and to creatively mesh their sounds together to make something beautiful. And what a beautiful representation of what the church yielding to the Spirit ought to look like. We spend lots of time together. We listen to each other. We affirm and value everybody's part, everybody's gifts, everybody's creative touch to all of this. And then we seek to not overpower and overtake and outshine one another, but to complement each other, getting in sync with each other, each of us adding our own unique part to the important work of the gospel. And my hope is that we can say, hey, more often. Hey, this is working. We're doing this together. We're supporting each other. Everybody's playing a part. And we're able to truly be ourselves and create something beautiful. And I'll just be honest, pastors can be the primary people to get in the way of this sometimes, because pastors want to outshine everybody sometimes. And so I have to be very extra mindful of this. You know, I see this kind of beauty happening at the gathering on Monday at our church almost every single week. I see it on Sundays as well, but I want to highlight Monday because it's a really beautiful thing that happens. We have this wild, diverse group of people who come out every single week. We are diverse in every way possible. In every way. You think about ideology or politics or life experiences, backgrounds, all the stuff. We are so different from each other. Yet over time, through lots of time spent together, because often people show up at 3 o'clock and we're together all the way until 8 o'clock, every single week spending time together, walking with each other, we're learning how to listen to one another, to value each other's perspectives, and to really get in sync around this common goal of providing a loving, welcoming, safe, and really free space for everybody. So no matter who comes to our doors can be here and be loved and be welcomed. And it's a really beautiful thing to see it working, because every week is different. You know, some weeks, it may go seamless. Some weeks we show up and we're shorthanded, and maybe people are coming in and a little out of sorts, and it's a little bit wild, and so we just have to improvise, right? And we make it work. And there's a kind of joke, we're like, well, it just kind of all works out every week. It just works, And we need more help, but it still just works, And I think a lot of that is because we have learned that we just have to be willing each Monday to show up and say, we don't know what this is going to bring, but we're going to love, we're going to follow the Spirit, and we'll improvise if we need to. And I'll tell you the reason why it works is because we have a team of people who pray together each week at 4. We have a team of people who stay connected throughout the week. We have a team of people who have learned to trust one another and learn to have each other's backs. And so we know that if I have to step over here and do something, I know other people will step in. I know if I have to take a risk here, then people are going to have my back, and it just works that way. And I think that we can start to model this and live into this in our church life even more fully. I have some questions I want y'all to consider as we close our time together. And Christina helped me come up with some of these, and I think these are helpful. So the first one I want to ask you all is, do you trust God's leadership and direction? I think the life of faith, I've mentioned this many times, is yielding to the Spirit. We talk about surrendering everything. It's surrendering ourselves, letting go so that the Spirit can lead us. And do you truly trust that God is going to lead you in the direction that you ought to be going? Because if we don't have that trust in God, then it's going to be very hard to surrender ourselves to God. The second question is, how much do you trust others on the journey of faith? Think about who has your back. Who has your back? Not just the people you necessarily see a lot, but who do you really trust? When things get really bad, who do you want to be there with you? And think about, too, whose back do you have? Are there people in your life where you've told them and they know because you've spent time with them, you've gotten to know them, they know that you have their back as well? Some of you all may not think that you have many people in your life. You may be thinking, I don't even know how to answer that question. So a good question for you is, how can you begin to build trusting relationships with other people of faith? It's going to take time. You're going to have to spend time together. You're going to have to spend time with people. So that may take you taking the initiative to actually hang out with people and spend time with them and get to know them. It might take up showing up to things that we're doing here, for example, and then taking care of one another, helping each other out, doing encouraging things for one another. Truly being present to people in their times of need. And then the last question is just, how might the Spirit be calling you to improvise, which I would say is to take a risk in love for God and for others. And maybe you can think about your family. Maybe your family has got some extra money laying around, and maybe God might be leading you to do something with that, to bless other people. That's a risk to do something like that. Maybe there's other ways. Maybe you've been living where you're living for a long time. You don't know your neighbors at all. You've never actually spent time with them, and maybe God could be calling you to just take a step of faith and invite them over to your house. You don't know how that could go. That could be a train wreck. You never know. But sometimes we got to just take a step of faith and trust that you got people with you and that you're going to invite them over and reach out. There's so many different things. Maybe God is calling you to show up in a community or show up to an organization or show up to volunteer somewhere where you feel a little bit nervous and you're not sure how it's going to go. And maybe God's leading you to take that step of faith, even though it might feel uncertain and scary. We can do those types of things because we know God is with us, but also because we know we have other people in our lives who are going to have our backs and support us. And so if we don't have that, then we need to start cultivating those relationships and start building those relationships of trust so that we can take more risk in our faith. I think often we're too risk averse and we're too afraid to step outside of our comfort zone because we think we have to do it by ourselves and we don't have people with us in this journey. And so we got to continue to ask those questions. How can we start to build more and more trust with each other so that we truly can live this life of faith in this more spontaneous way where we're following the Spirit, where the Spirit may want to lead us. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen.